They were popping champagne in my building, hanging a banner that read, Walker Legacy Planning Dinner. I didn't argue. I just activated the main display, showed them the deed, made the right calls at the right time, and turned their family party into an immediate, lawful eviction. Tonight in Riverton, everyone learned something. Family ties are touching, but ownership is a signature and a notary seal. My name is Lydia Walker. I am 32 years old, and I run Stone Pier Development Company. I built it from sketches on coffee shop napkins into one of Riverton's most aggressive stabilization firms. I buy the buildings no one wants, the ones rotting from the inside out, and I bring them back to life. I live on spreadsheets, structural reports, and the precise, beautiful language of contracts. My world is orderly. My business is built on boundaries. That Tuesday was supposed to be a victory. I was in my office, the real one, not the trailer on site, and the air was still with the hum of the servers. I was reviewing the final lease application for the third floor of 241 North Hemlock. This building was my masterpiece, a $2.3 million acquisition and restoration that nearly broke me twice. It was a neo-Gothic giant in the old shipping district, and I had polished every square inch of its granite and brass. This lease, a quiet but high-revenue architecture firm, would bring Hemlock to 95% occupancy. One more signature, and the asset would be fully stabilized, right on schedule for the refi. My phone, sitting face down on the desk, began to vibrate. It wasn't the slow buzz of a single text. It was a frantic, panicked series of bursts. I glanced at the screen. My cousin Tessa. I swiped it open. The first image loaded. My breath hitched. It was the penthouse terrace at 241 Hemlock. My mother, Eleanor Walker, was holding a champagne flute high, her arm linked with my Uncle Robert's. Behind them, the Riverton skyline glittered. They were beaming, as if they had just closed a deal themselves. The penthouse wasn't leased. It was my private reserve, the jewel I kept for myself. The second photo, my brother, Cole, was inside the third-floor commercial space, the exact space I was leasing. He had a metal tape measure hooked to his belt and was squinting at the north-facing wall, the one with the perfect, uninterrupted light. He was pointing, explaining something to my sister's husband. The third, my sister, Renee, with a cluster of her mommy blogger friends, posing by the historic elevator bank in the lobby. She had tagged 241 North Hemlock. The caption made my stomach acid churn. Touring the new Walker family annex. Mom is just showing us where the new studio space is going. So blessed to be part of this legacy. A link followed, a live stream. Renee's filtered, overly bright face filled my screen. Hey guys, so we're here at the new family HQ in Riverton. It is gorgeous. Mom is just finalizing the plans for the legacy dinner, and Cole is already claiming the third floor for his art studio. The light is just insane. This was not a visit. This was not a tour. This was an occupation. They were measuring my walls. They were popping champagne on my terrace. They were live streaming a fantasy to the public from my asset. I didn't text Tessa back. My thumb hit the speed dial for Noah, my building manager. He was new, barely 6 months on the job, sharp on logistics, but soft on confrontation. He picked up on the third ring. Ms. Walker, hi, I was actually just about to call you. The tremor in his voice was all the confirmation I needed. The air in my office felt suddenly thin, sharp. Noah, why is my family in my building? Silence, then a rush of words. Your mother arrived about an hour ago. Ms. Walker, she had paperwork. She said she was the primary partner. What paperwork, Noah? My voice was flat, cold. It looked official. It was an EIN registration for Stone Pier Development, listing her as the responsible party. She said she was meeting the investors and the family council for a legacy planning session and needed access to all floors, including the penthouse. She was very insistent. Ms. Walker, she said you were busy closing the final financing and that this was the preparatory meeting you had authorized. The responsible party. My blood went from hot to ice. I knew exactly what document she had. Noah, I said, cutting him off. That document is null. It has been void for 6 years. You were not authorized to grant access based on auxiliary filings. She said it was the founding charter. I didn't want to overstep. You did? I said. By not calling me, you did. I am hanging up. Do not speak to them. Do not grant them access to any other utility closets or data rooms. Await my arrival. Do you understand me? Yes, Ms. Walker. He sounded terrified. He should be. I dropped the phone on the desk and stood up. The founding charter. It always came back to the $15,000. When I started Stone Pier, I was 25. I had a business plan that could stop a bullet, but my credit was air. The bank wouldn't give me a seed loan. A measly $15,000 line of credit, without a cosigner. My father was gone, and my mother, Eleanor, had family money. She agreed. She co-signed. As a condition, the bank required her to be listed on the initial Draft 0 Articles of Organization, a responsible party, until the note was satisfied. I paid that loan off in 11 months, not 12, 11. I drove to her house, the day the paid-in-full letter arrived from the bank, with a cashier's check for an additional $1,500, 10% interest. A gratitude bonus, I called it. And I brought my lawyer, Maddox Hale. I remember the scene perfectly. Eleanor, in her silk lounge robe, taking the check with one hand and the pen with the other. Maddox had the amendment to the operating agreement ready. It explicitly removed her name, her title, and any shadow of her association with Stone Pier Development, She signed it. She smiled that breezy, dismissive smile. I always knew you'd do it, darling. You get your drive from me. It was notarized. It was filed with the Secretary of State. It was 6 years ago. Stone Pier Development was 100% mine. 241 North Hemlock was acquired 4 years after her name was legally and irrevocably scrubbed from my company. Her using that obsolete, voided document wasn't an oversight. It wasn't confusion. It was calculated fraud. The shock that had seized me, that raw personal sting of how could they, receded. The developer took over, the CEO. My pulse, which had been hammering, slowed to a steady, cold drumbeat. I dialed Maddox. He picked up before the first ring finished. Hale? Maddox, we have a situation at 241 North Hemlock. Code Red. He didn't ask questions. Code Red meant an active, hostile threat to an asset. Who? Squatters? Protesters? My family, I said. The word tasted like ash. Eleanor is leading them. They've gained access under false pretenses using voided documents. They are trespassing, misrepresenting themselves as owners, and live streaming it. I need you and 2 paralegals at the building in 20 minutes. And Maddox, bring the binders, the Hemlock acquisition, the Stone Pier cap table, and the Eleanor file. 20 minutes, he said, and the line went dead. My next call was to Riverton Central Security, not the police, not yet. The police would see a domestic dispute. I saw a corporate liability. This is Lydia Walker at Stone Pier. I have an active trespassing and misrepresentation event at 241 North Hemlock. I need a 4-man executive team, unarmed, black suits, for access control and witness removal. Bill the Stone Pier corporate account. While the dispatcher confirmed, I turned to my secure printer. I didn't need to search my network. The Eleanor file was always 2 clicks away, a digital emergency kit I hoped I'd never need. I printed Document 1, the current, fully executed. Operating Agreement for Stone Pier Development Co. My name, Lydia Walker, listed as 100% managing member. Document 2, the General Warranty Deed for 241 North Hemlock, held by Hemlock Hold Co. LLC, a special purpose vehicle wholly owned by Stone Pier. Document 3, the notarized, countersigned, state-filed amendment from 6 years ago, removing Eleanor Walker from the Articles of Organization. Document 4, the time-stamped bank transfer confirmation, the $15,000 repayment, plus the gratitude bonus. I printed 3 complete sets, The paper felt warm, solid, as I slid them into crisp, unlabeled manila folders. Facts, not feelings. I didn't take the elevator. I took the fire stairs to the executive garage. My heels striking the concrete in a clipped, angry rhythm, my sedan roared to life in the enclosed space. I ripped out of the garage, ignoring the speed limit, and plunged into the 3 p.m. Riverton traffic. I hated this. I had built my life on clean lines, clear contracts, and emotional distance. My family operated in the swamp of implication, of shared history, of emotional debt. They believed that because I had built something, it was, by extension, theirs to claim. They believed their $15,000 risk, a risk I had neutralized in less than a year, had bought them a permanent stake in my future, in my $2.3 million asset. I turned onto North Hemlock. The problem was infinitely worse than I thought. The private parking lot, usually immaculate and half-empty, was a circus. My Aunt Clara's massive SUV was parked diagonally across 2 spaces. My Uncle Robert's vintage convertible, the one he only drove on sunny days, was blocking the handicap ramp. Cars I hadn't seen since a disastrous Thanksgiving 3 years prior were clustered near the entrance. And then I saw him. Standing near the brass-plated lobby doors, smoking an obnoxious cigar, was my Uncle Robert. He was talking animatedly to a man in an expensive, slightly shiny suit. I recognized the man from a local business journal. He was a business consultant who specialized in high-conflict family buyouts and partnership dissolutions. My blood didn't just run cold, it froze solid. This wasn't a spontaneous, entitled family gathering. This wasn't just Eleanor feeling nostalgic and overstepping. This was a coordinated, premeditated ambush. They were planning. They had brought a consultant. They were here to stage a corporate takeover. I pulled my car directly into the red-painted fire lane, right in front of the lobby doors, and put it in park. I could see them through the glass. Renee was setting up a tripod for her live stream. Cole was walking back from the elevator, laughing. The old Lydia, the daughter, the sister, wanted to storm in. She wanted to grab the champagne bottle from her mother's hand and smash it on the marble floor. She wanted to scream, to ask Eleanor why, to remind Cole that I was the one who paid for his last rehab stint, to tell Renee that I was the one who financed her disastrous essential oils startup, just to get her out of the house. I put my hand on the 3 manila folders, resting on the passenger seat. Do not argue. Do not raise your voice. Do not engage in the domestic drama. They want to fight. They want me to yell. They want a scene they can film, edit, and twist into hysterical, ungrateful daughter attacks loving family. I will not give it to them. I took one deep, methodical breath, drawing in the smell of new leather and old anger. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. My face was pale, but my eyes were clear. I stepped out of the car, the folder in my hand, and walked toward the lobby of the building I owned. The heavy brass handle of the front door felt cold. Even on a Tuesday afternoon, I pushed it open. My lobby, my 2-story Italian marble lobby that I had fought the Historic Commission for 6 months to restore, was unrecognizable. A long vinyl banner was strung between 2 faux Corinthian pillars. Walker Family Estate Planning Dinner. The font was a gaudy gold script, the kind of thing Eleanor loved. Beside the entrance, where my tenant's bronze directory should have been, stood a folding table draped in a black cloth. A distant cousin I hadn't seen in 5 years. Chloe sat behind it with a clipboard and a stack of adhesive name tags. A check-in desk, for an event I had not authorized, in a building I owned. Chloe looked up, her smile frozen and panicked when she saw me. Lydia, we weren't expecting you yet. Your mother said you were in meetings until 5. I ignored her. My eyes scanned the room. There were at least 30 people milling about. Aunts, uncles, cousins, and their spouses. They were touching the walls. They were inspecting the new light fixtures. They were sipping champagne from flutes that had been catered. Eleanor was the center of it all. Of course, she was holding court by the elevator bank, her hand resting proprietorially on the etched brass door. She was in her element, the gracious matriarch. And this is just the beginning, she was saying, her voice projecting through the space. We have to look after the Walker legacy. It's a responsibility we all share, and I intend to make sure it is divided equally among those who helped build it. Helped build it. The $15,000. My uncle's consultant, the man from the parking lot, was standing beside her, nodding gravely. He wasn't drinking. He was observing. His eyes tracked the load-bearing columns, the ceiling height, the finishes. He was taking small, precise notes in a leather-bound book. He was conducting an internal valuation. I felt the manila folder in my hand, the weight of the notarized facts. "Lydia! Darling!" Eleanor finally spotted me, her smile widening, completely devoid of guilt. It was a performance of such breathtaking audacity I almost had to admire it. "You made it. We just started the initial walkthrough. Mr. Vance here is helping us assess the portfolio." "The portfolio," I repeated, my voice flat. Before she could respond, Cole clattered down the main staircase from the second floor. He was energized, his eyes bright in a way I hadn't seen since before his last relapse. "Lyd, you have to see the third floor. The north light is unbelievable. It's settled. That's my new studio. I'm moving my canvases in this weekend. We can finally get the Walker name into the gallery scene." "And the second floor," Renee chimed in, walking over to join the group, her phone still in her hand, presumably still streaming. "The entire second floor is perfect for the Moms and Mindfulness Co-op. We're going to have 16 yoga stations and a juice bar. The acoustics are fantastic for meditation." They weren't asking. They were claiming. They were dividing my stabilized assets, my signed and leased revenue streams, like pirates splitting treasure. "Mr. Vance?" I said, looking directly at the consultant. His name, I filed it away. "You're assessing this building?" Vance snapped his notebook shut. He had the smooth, professional veneer of a man who dealt in hostile takeovers. "Just a preliminary observation. Ms. Walker, your mother retained me to help the family organize its assets for the next generation." "There is nothing to organize," I said. The lobby's ambient chatter began to fade. "Now, Lydia," Eleanor started, her tone shifting to one of gentle reprimand. "This is business. This is about what's fair." Right on cue, the heavy front door opened again. Maddox Hale walked in. He was flanked by 2 paralegals, both carrying locked document cases. Behind them, 4 uniformed, black-suited executive security officers from Riverton Central entered. They did not look like party guests. They fanned out, 2 remaining at the doors, 2 moving to the elevator bank. The music, some light jazz Eleanor had piped in, suddenly seemed very loud. Renee stopped filming. "What is this, Lydia?" Cole demanded. "Who are these men?" "This," I said, "is my legal counsel, and this is my security team." Maddox didn't look at me. He walked directly to the center of the lobby, placed his briefcase on the check-in desk, and snapped it open. Chloe shrank away from him. "Good afternoon," Maddox said, his voice cutting through the silence. "My name is Maddox Hale. I am General Counsel for Stone Pier Development Company and its sole managing member, Lydia Walker." He looked at Eleanor. He looked at Mr. Vance. "We seem to have a significant misunderstanding. This is not a family planning dinner. This is a private commercial property. The event you are holding is unauthorized, and your presence here constitutes criminal trespass." A collective gasp. My Aunt Clara actually dropped her champagne flute. "How dare you?" Eleanor hissed, her mother hen mask evaporating. "I am a founding partner of this company. This building is my legacy." Maddox didn't blink. He pulled the first document from his case. "This is the current, fully executed operating agreement for Stone Pier Development Company, filed with the state of Illinois. Lydia Walker is listed as the 100% owner. Her ownership is total. There are no partners." He pulled the second document. "This is the general warranty deed for this property, 241 North Hemlock. It is owned exclusively by Hemlock Holdco LLC, a special purpose vehicle which, in turn, is 100% owned by Stone Pier Development. Your name, Eleanor, appears nowhere. He pulled the third, and this is the amendment to the original Articles of Organization, filed 6 years ago. It is signed by you, Eleanor, and notarized, removing you as a responsible party in exchange for a full and final repayment of a $15,000 seed loan, a loan, I might add, that was repaid with interest. He laid the 3 documents side by side on the table. The paper was crisp. The signatures were clear. Mr. Vance, the consultant, leaned in to look. He read the amendments. His expression didn't change, but he took a small, involuntary step away from my mother. He recognized the truth. His assessment was now compromised. "This is ridiculous," Renee shouted. "Mom, he's lying. This is just lawyer tricks." "The documents are filed with the state, Ms. Walker," one of the paralegals said quietly, already logging the interaction on a laptop. "They are public record." I turned away from the confrontation. This was the trap, the screaming match. I wouldn't fall into it. I left Maddox to hold the line. "Noah," I said, gesturing to my building manager, who was hiding near the fire exit. He scurried over. "The control room, now!" We walked down the hall, the sounds of my family's outrage muffled by the thick fire door. The security room was cold and dark, lit only by the blue-gray glow of 30 different camera angles. She had this," Noah stammered. Holding out a single piece of paper, I took it. It was exactly what I expected. The original, Draft 0 EIN registration form, a federal tax document. It listed Stone Pier Development Co. and, in the box for responsible party, her name, Eleanor Walker. It was dated 7 years ago. It was legally meaningless for ownership, a fossil, but it looked official enough to bully a new manager. "She told me it was the founding charter," he whispered. "I know," I said. "Now, pull the access logs, all key fobs, all override codes, for the last 3 weeks." I watched the screen as he typed. The truth, the real truth, spooled out in a series of green and red timestamps. This wasn't a single invasion. This was a campaign. 3 weeks ago, 10:17 p.m. Eleanor, using a master override. 2 weeks ago, 8:04 p.m. Cole, using a temporary fob Noah had issued at Eleanor's request for the contractor. He was in the 3rd floor space, measuring, last Friday, 2:30 p.m. Renee and 3 other women, bypassing the main desk, using a service elevator code, last Saturday, 9 o'clock a.m. Uncle Robert and Mr. Vance. They were in the lobby, the penthouse, and the utility basement for 2 full hours. They had been casing my building, systematically, using my mother's obsolete paperwork to gain access, exploiting off-peak hours, and preparing their attack. And then I knew. This wasn't about Cole getting a free studio or Renee getting a yoga space. Those were just scraps, the entitlements of the greedy. This was about the consultant. This was about the Walker family estate planning dinner. My refinancing. I was 3 days from closing a major refi on 241 Hemlock. It was a complex deal that would unlock millions in capital, freeing me up to acquire the entire city block. A deal like that requires immaculate title. No disputes, no liens, no interested parties. This was their goal. They weren't trying to win the building in court. They knew they couldn't. They were trying to dirty the file. They were going to have Mr. Baum write a bogus report. They were going to file a frivolous lawsuit claiming founding partner status, using that voided EIN paper as proof. They would file a lis pendens, a notice of pending action, against the property. My lenders would see it. The underwriters would balk. The refi would freeze. My variable rate bridge loan would come due. The penalties would stack. My cash flow would choke. They were here to create a crisis, a fire they could generously put out in exchange for a piece of my company. They weren't just trying to steal a room. They were trying to break my legs to force a settlement. The cold, precise fury locked into place. This wasn't a family drama. This was corporate sabotage. I turned to Noah. My voice was quiet, but it did not tremble. You will initiate a full security protocol, effective immediately. First, call the locksmith. I want every physical lock on this property recorded, every office, every utility closet, every stairwell, every apartment. Tonight, I don't care what it costs. Yes, Ms. Walker. Second, you will back up the last 30 days of access logs from this server, not to the network, to a physical, encrypted drive. You will give that drive to Mr. Hale's paralegal. Then, you will wipe the local log.
Got it.
Third, you will personally go to the mechanical, electrical, and data rooms and place physical padlocks on them. The only key comes to me. They have been in the basement. I will not risk them touching my infrastructure. And them? He asked, gesturing toward the lobby. The party? I looked at the monitor. Maddox was standing firm. My family was clustered, whispering. Their plot momentarily derailed by the facts. Eleanor was on her phone, probably calling her own lawyer. They thought this was the main event. They thought they could win by shouting, by shaming me, by invoking family. I would not play their game. I would not fall into the trap of a public, emotional fight. They wanted a screaming match. I was going to give them a legal execution. I walked out of the control room, the fraudulent paper in my hand. It was time to stop investigating and start building my case. The lobby was a wreck. A broken champagne flute lay on the marble. Name tags were scattered on the check-in table. My family was gone, escorted out by the quiet, imposing men in black suits. The only sounds were the whir of the locksmith's drill changing the main tumbler and the quiet, furious typing of Maddox's paralegals, who had commandeered the concierge desk. We were in the control room. The encrypted hard drive, the one containing the 30-day access logs, was already sealed in an evidence bag on the table. They are not done, Maddox said. He was leaning against the wall, his suit jacket off, his tie loosened. He hadn't raised his voice once. That was a probe. They brought a consultant. They were measuring walls. They were testing your defenses. They were trying to stop the refee, I said, the pieces clicking into place with sickening clarity. They file a frivolous claim, a lis pendens, cloud the title. My lenders freeze. They were trying to manufacture a crisis to force a settlement. Precisely, Maddox said. They want to make this he said. She said, a messy, emotional family dispute. They know the financial world hates drama. So we are not going to give them drama. We are going to give them an audit. He turned to his paralegal. Begin drafting the transparency press release. I looked at him. A press release? Not a statement, he clarified. A timeline, antiseptic, devoid of emotion. We are going to preempt their narrative. We will state that on May 4th, 6 years ago, a $15,000 seed loan was co-signed by Eleanor Walker. On April 10th, 11 months later, that loan was repaid in full. On that same day, an additional $1,100 payment was made, representing a 10% gratitude bonus, and on that same day, a notarized and state-filed amendment to the operating agreement was executed by all parties, terminating any and all association. We will attach the redacted bank statements and a scan of the amendment's signature page. This was why I paid Maddox his retainer. He didn't just practice law. He waged war with it. My team is already building the digital dossier, I said, my mind racing ahead. The full operating agreement, the complete cap table for Stone Pier, the general warranty deed for Hemlock, every bank statement from that fiscal year, all of it time-stamped, all of it searchable, but it's not enough. Maddox raised an eyebrow. They're pushing a built-together narrative. It's poison. I need to sever it. I need to prove that not 1 cent of her money is in this building, or any other asset I've acquired since I paid her off. I pulled out my phone. It was past 7 p.m., but I knew the man I needed to call worked all hours. I'm hiring a forensic accountant. Tonight, I want a complete, certified cash flow analysis. I want a bright line drawn on the day that amendment was signed. I want him to trace the acquisition funds for 241 North Hemlock and every other property in my portfolio. I want a sworn affidavit that states, unequivocally, that Eleanor Walker has zero financial stake, direct or indirect, in any of it. Maddox allowed himself a thin smile. That's the kill shot. It's the truth, I said. The first volley from their side came exactly as I expected, not through a lawyer, but through social media. The next morning, my phone lit up. My sister, Renee, had posted a 30-minute, tear-filled video to her blog. The title was, "My Mother's Legacy Stolen: The Walker Family Betrayal." It was a masterpiece of emotional manipulation. She sat in her perfect beige living room, dabbing at her eyes. She spoke of a company built from the ground up by a mother's love and sacrifice. She talked about Eleanor pouring her inheritance into my dream. She conveniently omitted the amount and the repayment. She painted a picture of a loving matriarch who had co-founded an empire, only to be brutally, coldly, and illegally cast aside by a greedy, ungrateful daughter. She claimed her mother had been assaulted by armed guards while trying to plan a legacy dinner for the family's new property. By 9 a.m., 2 local Riverton gossip blogs, the kind that thrive on the drama of local business families, had picked it up. They embedded Renee's video. The narrative was simple, powerful, and utterly false. Lydia Walker, the Ice Queen developer, screws her own mother out of the company they built together. My email exploded. Is this true? No comment. But this is a bad look, Lydia. Maddox's team was already moving. Before 10 a.m., cease and desist letters were dispatched, not by email, but by process server. They landed at Renee's house, Cole's apartment, my mother's front door, and the legal departments of the 2 blogs. The letters were brutal. They cited defamation, false light, and most importantly, tortious interference with contractual relations. My refinancing. It didn't just ask them to take the posts down. It warned them that they were now knowingly participating in an attempt to sabotage a multi-million-dollar financial deal, and that Stone Pier Development would hold them personally and financially liable for all damages. The blogs folded in less than an hour. Their posts were replaced with a curt, "This story has been removed pending a legal review." Renee's video stayed up for another 3 hours, a monument to her own arrogance, before it, too, vanished. But the damage was done. The smoke from that fire was already in the air. Playing defense wasn't enough. I called a contact at Market Movers, a national finance podcast I had been a guest on twice before. "Sarah," I said, "I have a pitch for you. I want to do a segment, the practical, legal, and emotional boundaries of family and business." She was intrigued. "How personal are we getting?" "I'm not going to name names," I said. "I'm not going to talk about my family. I'm going to talk about contracts. I'm going to talk about what every entrepreneur needs to do to protect their company from their family. I'm going to talk about why a $15,000 seed loan doesn't entitle someone to a $2 million asset." I recorded the podcast that afternoon from my office. I was calm. I was professional. I was the voice of reason. I told the story of a hypothetical young entrepreneur. I explained the legal difference between a co-signer and a partner. I walked the listeners through the exact, methodical process of repaying a loan, adding a bonus, and most critically, executing a notarized amendment to the operating agreement to formally sever the relationship. I never mentioned Eleanor. I never mentioned 241 Hemlock. I didn't have to. I was speaking directly to the people who mattered. My lenders, my investors, the entire Riverton financial community. I was telling them, in no uncertain terms, I am not the emotional one. I am the one with the paperwork. My house is in order. The real fallout, however, wasn't on the blogs. It was in my inbox. My assistant, Tessa, my cousin, the one who had sent me the first warning photo, and the only family member who actually worked for me, walked in, her face pale. "Lydia, the team from Westbridge Capital just postponed tomorrow's meeting, and the call with the Chicago Pension Fund. They're rescheduling. That's 3 investment meetings that have evaporated since this morning." This was it. The poison was working. Postponed was a soft no. It meant they were watching. They were waiting to see if I was a safe bet or a family circus. I would not let them wait. "Tessa," I said, "get our head of IR. I want a secure data room built. Now." For the next 2 hours, we worked. We didn't just send the press release Maddox had drafted. We went further. We uploaded everything. The full, unredacted operating agreement, the complete, time-stamped deed for 241 Hemlock, the bank statements showing the $15,000 repayment and the $1,500 bonus, the scanned, notarized, state-filed amendment with Eleanor's signature, bold and clear, and about 48 hours later, we added the preliminary report from the forensic accountant, which stated with zero ambiguity that 100% of the acquisition capital for 241 Hemlock and all other Stone Pier assets came from revenue generated after Eleanor's legal separation from the company. I drafted a personal email. I sent it to the 3 investors who had postponed. I sent it to my primary lenders for the refinancing. You may have heard some unfortunate noise in the last 24 hours, originating from a domestic source. I have always believed that transparency is the best policy. Attached is a link to a secure data room containing the complete, unredacted, and verifiable legal and financial record of the matter. As you will see, all obligations were satisfied years ago, and all ownership is clear and uncontested. I welcome any and all due diligence and look forward to our rescheduled meeting. It was a power move. I was inviting them to look at my books, confident in what they would find. Internally, Stone Pier changed overnight. I issued a new, company-wide protocol. All non-tenant visitors, without exception, were to be pre-registered in the system by a tenant or a corporate officer. No one, not even my mother, was to be granted access based on a name or a piece of paper. Any legal document presented at any property was to be immediately photographed and emailed to Maddox's office for real-time verification. Noah was retrained. The entire building staff was retrained. That door was closed, locked, and reinforced. Finally, we established a factual inquiry hotline and email address, managed by Maddox's paralegals. It was for tenants, vendors, and investors. Any question. One simple, factual, documented answer. Is it true your mother is a co-owner? Thank you for your inquiry. Per the attached public filing, the sole owner of the property is Hemlock Holdco LLC, which is wholly owned by Stone Pier Development, which is wholly owned by Lydia Walker. Here's the link to the Secretary of State's file. The public gossip was still a mess. Half of Riverton thought I was a monster. The other half thought I was a boss. But the financial world, my world, had calmed. They don't read blogs. They read documents. They understand notarized seals. The Chicago Pension Fund called back. The meeting was back on. I had won the battle. I had secured the perimeter. But a deep, cold silence had fallen over the Walker family. Eleanor, Cole, and Renee had gone dark. They hadn't responded to the C&D. They hadn't posted again. This was wrong. My mother never, ever let someone else have the last word. They had tried an ambush, and it had failed. They had tried a media smear, and it had been neutralized. They weren't retreating. They were regrouping. The silence from my family was a vacuum. It was the deep, pressurized quiet before a bulkhead fails. They weren't gone. They were plotting. They had tried brute force and failed. They had tried a media smear and been neutralized. Now, they would be planning something more insidious, something aimed at the complex, vulnerable machinery of my finances. They're going to sue, Maddox said. 2 days later, we were in his corner office, the Riverton skyline gray behind him. They will file a frivolous claim, and they will file a lis pendens against the property. It doesn't have to be valid. It just has to exist. It will halt the refi. They know this. So, I said, leaning forward, we change the board. We make the asset a harder target. We make it a different target, he corrected, tapping a thick, pre-prepared document on his desk. I've had this structure ready for your signature for 3 months. It's standard asset protection. Given the circumstances, I think we accelerate the timeline to immediately. The document was a quitclaim deed. I was transferring 241 North Hemlock from Stone Pier Development's direct ownership into a new, separate, and wholly owned entity, a special purpose vehicle. Hemlock Holdco LLC. I read from the signature page. Exactly, Maddox said. 100% owned by Stone Pier, so your equity is unchanged. But the building itself is now legally firewalled. Any lawsuit they file has to name this new entity. It's a new layer of armor. It insulates the parent company, Stone Pier, from any direct liability or legal entanglement they try to create. They want to attack the building? Fine. They'll have to fight this new, single-purpose company that has one asset and no history with your mother. I signed the stack of documents, the deed, the new operating agreement for Hemlock Holdco, the state filings. Within 24 hours, the public record would be updated. This is good defense, I said, capping my pen. Now I want to build a countermeasure, something they won't see coming. I'm listening. They're attacking me as a person, as a daughter. I'm going to remove me from the equation and replace it with an innocent third party, someone they can't bully, someone the public, and a judge, would hate to see harmed. I picked up the phone and dialed the director of Northlight Arts. Northlight was a respected, scrappy, and brilliant nonprofit that brought art installations to underserved neighborhoods. I had been on their junior board for 2 years. They were always looking for high-impact, low-cost gallery space. An hour later, their director, a sharp woman named Maria, was in my office. I have a proposition, I said. I'm structuring 241 Hemlock to be more community-facing. I want to offer Northlight a framework contract, a 1-year, rolling right of first refusal for event use of the penthouse in the lobby, for a symbolic $1 deposit. Maria was stunned. Lydia, that's incredibly generous. The penthouse? For our fundraisers? It's a partnership, I said, sliding the draft agreement Maddox had drawn up across the table. You get a guaranteed, high-profile space. In exchange, Hemlock Holdco gets an official community partner. All I ask is that you pay the $1 deposit and that you start booking your dates immediately. Be aggressive with the calendar. I want your name on it. She signed. The deposit was paid. A single dollar bill I stapled to the contract. The moment her signature dried, the legal landscape shifted. Maddox, I said over the speakerphone as Maria left. We now have a legally contracted third-party tenant. A third-party interest, Maddox's voice replied, the satisfaction clear. Beautiful. Now, any attempt by your family to freeze the asset or file a lien isn't just an attack on you, it's an attack on Northlight Arts. It's an attempt to disrupt the rights of a paying tenant, a nonprofit. They file a lis pendens. We file an emergency motion to strike, and we bring in Northlight's director to testify about how the Walker family dispute is harming her community arts program. A judge will tear them apart. The fortress was getting stronger. Now, I had to fortify the walls. My next step was to rewrite the rules of the building itself. The old house rules were for tenants. The new ones were for the public. They were posted in the lobby the next morning, engraved on a tasteful but unmissable bronze plaque. Building regulations for 241 North Hemlock. All non-tenant gatherings of more than 10 persons require a certified event permit, liability insurance, and written approval from Hemlock Holdco LLC Property Management. No exceptions. It wasn't just a sign, it was a new legal standard. Beneath it, we installed a small, framed QR code. I'd seen it done at a tech building in Austin. It was bold. It was transparent. Ownership and Governance, the title read. Anyone, a tenant, a visitor, a process server, my mother, could scan it. It linked directly to the newly filed state registration for Hemlock Holdco LLC. It linked to the public deed, showing the transfer. It linked to the new building rules. It was the entire paper trail, open to the world. It said, I have nothing to hide. This is who owns the building. You are not on the list. Next, I tackled the insurance. I called my broker. I need a new rider for the property, I said. Event liability, and I need a separate policy for malicious interference. I'm anticipating a scenario where someone stages an accident on premises to force a settlement. I want us covered. It was expensive, but it was cheaper than a lawsuit. With the paper shields in place, I moved to the physical. My meeting with the county sheriff was not a call. It was a face-to-face in his office. I didn't come in as a daughter with family problems. I came in as Lydia Walker, CEO of Stone Pier, one of the largest property taxpayers in his district. Sheriff, I said, sliding one of my manila folders across his desk. I am here to report a corporate security issue, and I need to establish a protocol for your officers. I didn't show him Renee's tearful video. I showed him the security log. I showed him the 30 days of unauthorized access. I showed him the voided EIN document Eleanor had used. This was not a family visit. Sheriff, this was a coordinated, fraudulent entry into a multi-million-dollar commercial property for the purposes of corporate sabotage. My mother is not an owner. She is a civilian. My brother is not a future tenant. He is a trespasser. His entire demeanor shifted. This wasn't a domestic. This was a white-collar crime. I am not pressing charges today, I said. I am building a file. What I need from you is an assurance that when I call 911, and I may have to, you don't send an officer prepared for a shouting match. You send an officer who has this file, who understands this is trespassing, and who is prepared to remove individuals from my property. I will have video. I will have my attorney present. I will provide the legal basis for the removal. He nodded, his eyes on the forged access log. You will get that assurance, Ms. Walker. This file will be flagged. The final layers of defense were digital. I had our tech team implement a new protocol. No high-function command in the building, not the freight elevators, not the HVAC system, not the electrical panels for the event spaces, could be activated without a two-factor digital signature, a code from the building manager, and a countersign from my personal encrypted device. No one could ever again trick Noah into giving them the keys to the kingdom. Stone Pier issued new access cards to all tenants and staff, not simple fobs, dynamic authorization cards. They cross-referenced the building's rent roll and employee database in real time. If a lease expired, if an employee was terminated, if a document was not in order, the card associated with it would be deactivated instantly. The system was no longer built on trust. It was built on verifiable, real-time data. The pieces were in place: the legal armor, the public-facing transparency, the law enforcement protocol, the digital fortress. Then, I got the call I was waiting for, from Tessa. My cousin had been quiet since the first incident. She was still my assistant, but she was also still a walker. She was invited to the family meetings. I had never asked her to spy. I didn't have to. Lydia? Her voice was a whisper. I heard the clinking of glasses in the background. She was at my mother's house. I'm here. Tessa, are you safe? Yes, I'm in the powder room. I have to be quick. They're planning another one. My stomach tightened. Another what? Another party. Eleanor is furious about the new rules. She's calling it Lydia's pathetic little sign. She's planning a gala for the Walker Family Heritage Fund, this Saturday, at 241 Hemlock, in the penthouse. This Saturday, they were moving fast. They're inviting everyone, Tessa whispered, her voice cracking. Investors, old family friends, even a reporter from the Riverton Gazette, Uncle Robert's lawyer, a man named Vaughn Mercer, is going to be there. He's bringing papers. Papers? The lawsuit? The lis pendens? They're going to serve you, Tessa said, confirming my worst fear. In the middle of the party, in front of everyone, they're going to hand you the lawsuit while the reporter takes pictures. Eleanor said it. She said, "We'll serve her with a lawsuit and a glass of champagne. Let's see her try to refinance that." It was a trap, a PR ambush designed to humiliate me and cloud the title in one single, devastating move. Tessa, I said, my voice calm. You did the right thing by calling me. Go back to the party. Do not take notes. Just listen. Remember what you hear, especially anything about forcing a settlement or pressuring me, then go home. I hung up the phone. I looked at the calendar on my wall. This Saturday. I pulled up my email and sent a new message to Maria at Northlight Arts. Maria, I hope you're well. An urgent request. I need Northlight to officially book the penthouse at 241 Hemlock for this entire coming weekend, Friday through Sunday. For immediate installation setup, I need the contract signed and the booking on the building's official public calendar within the hour. Hemlock Holdco will, of course, waive all fees. She replied in 10 minutes. Done. The booking is live. Is everything okay? I smiled. The trap was now set, but it wasn't theirs. It was mine. The gala invitation I'd heard about from Tessa wasn't the attack. It was the public execution. The legal assassination attempt came first. It landed on a Thursday morning, not with a whisper, but with the thud of a process server dropping a thick, bound document on my assistant's desk. The lawsuit. Vaughn Mercer, my uncle's bulldog lawyer, had filed. It was exactly the garbage fire of emotional claims and legal fictions I expected. Eleanor Walker versus Stone Pier Development Codes and Lydia Walker. The claims were audacious. Implied partnership. Breach of fiduciary duty. Unjust enrichment. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. Vaughn Mercer's argument was that the $15,000 was not a loan, but a foundational, catalytic investment. He argued that Eleanor's mentorship, guidance, and family name were intangible assets that had built the company, entitling her to a significant, ongoing equity stake. He was painting her as the passive, victimized co-founder, cheated by her own daughter. But the lawsuit itself was just paper. The real weapon was buried in the fourth exhibit, an ex parte motion for a temporary restraining order, a TRO. They were asking a judge to immediately, and without me being present to argue, freeze all operating accounts associated with Stone Pier Development and 241 North Hemlock. They were trying to cut off my oxygen. The bank called at 11:03 a.m. My commercial loan officer, a man I'd had lunch with a dozen times, sounded sick. Lydia, I'm so sorry. We received a court order. It's a TRO. I have to place a temporary hold on your primary operating account and the revolving line of credit. It's frozen, effective immediately. Frozen? Not just the refinancing, not just the expansion capital. My operating account, the account I use to pay my staff, the account I use to pay the electricity, the account I use to pay the window washers, the security team, and the contractors who were, at that very moment, framing out the second floor. I hung up the phone. The air in my office felt thick, unbreathable. This was the chokehold. This was the crisis they had been trying to manufacture. They had finally done it. At 11:30, my phone rang again. It was my lead contractor from the second floor build-out. Lydia, I just got a weird call. From a lawyer named Mercer. He said your company's assets are frozen? He said you might not have signing authority. My guys are on site. I've got a payroll to make on Friday. I have to pull my team. I can't work on credit. Hold on, Frank, I said, my voice dangerously calm. Give me 2 hours. An email popped up. The architecture firm. The one I'd been celebrating the lease for. Dear Lydia, in light of some disquieting news, we feel it prudent to pause the final execution of the lease for the third-floor space. We will await clarification on these legal matters. 2 more emails just like it arrived from the other prospective tenants. In the span of 90 minutes, my refi was dead, my building operations were crippled, my construction was halted, and my incoming revenue stream had evaporated. I looked at the lawsuit, at my mother's sworn affidavit attached to it, where she claimed she feared I would dissipate the family's assets without court intervention. The anger was so pure, so cold, it was almost serene. I wasn't a daughter, I wasn't even a person. I was a problem to be solved, and this was their solution. I buzzed Maddox. They did it? TRO? The accounts are frozen. I expected him to curse. I expected him to rush. He did neither. His voice was as flat as my own. Good. It's filed. Now we can respond. I'll be in your conference room in 10 minutes. Bring your entire digital file. When he arrived, he wasn't alone. He brought the forensic accountant I had hired. The man, a quiet CPA named Singh, was carrying a single, bound report. This is not a legal fight, Lydia, Maddox said, setting his briefcase on my conference table. This is an administrative execution. They have filed a motion based on lies. We will file a motion to dismiss based on verifiable facts. We will not argue. We will prove. For the next 4 hours, we worked. Maddox drafted the motion to dismiss and a counter-motion to dissolve the TRO on emergency grounds. He didn't just deny their claims. He systematically dismembered them. To their claim of implied partnership, we attached Exhibit A, the notarized, state-filed amendment from 6 years ago, signed by Eleanor, explicitly severing all ties. To their claim of foundational investment, we attached Exhibit B, the time-stamped bank transfers, the $15,000 repayment, the $1,500 gratitude bonus. To their claim of unjust enrichment and that Eleanor's money had built the portfolio, we attached Exhibit C. This was Singh's report, the forensic timeline. It was beautiful in its simplicity. It was a single-page flowchart on the left side. Prior to amendment, it listed the assets of Stonepier, one checking account, and the remaining balance of the seed loan. On the right side, post-amendment, the timeline branched out. It showed the acquisition of my first duplex, funded by revenue, the acquisition of the downtown office, funded by the sale of the duplex, and finally, the acquisition of 241 North Hemlock, funded by a cascade of profits and commercial loans that all originated after Eleanor was legally and financially gone. The report traced every dollar. Not 1 cent had come from her. Singh's sworn affidavit was attached. At no point after the date of the amendment, it read, did Eleanor Walker contribute any capital, tangible or intangible, to any acquisition or operation of Stonepier Development Co. or its subsidiaries. The final piece came at 3 p.m. Tessa arrived, unannounced. She was shaking. She wasn't carrying a purse. She was holding a small, spiral-bound reporter's notebook, the kind you buy at a drugstore for 99 cents. I wrote it down, she whispered, her eyes wide with fear. After you called, after every time I was at your mom's house, I wrote what they said. She opened it. Her handwriting was a frantic scrawl. Page after page of quotes. Just need to apply pressure. The refi is her weak spot. A judge will see family and force them to mediate. That's when we get our peace. Vaughn says if we can just tie her up for 60 days, the bank will call her loans. Make her bleed cash. She'll have to settle for a piece. Tell Cole he can have the 3rd floor, but he has to show up and back the story. This wasn't a notebook. This was a confession. It was proof of intent. It wasn't a good faith dispute over ownership. It was a conspiracy to commit commercial extortion. Maddox looked at me. May I? I nodded. Tessa nodded. Maddox's paralegal took the notebook, photographed every page, and notarized each one. Exhibit D, a sworn affidavit from Tessa Walker, including photographs of handwritten notes from the plaintiffs, documenting a premeditated plan to file a frivolous lawsuit for the express purpose of manufacturing financial distress to force a settlement. Maddox hit send on the e-filing at 4:51 p.m. A copy went to the judge. A copy went to Vaughn Mercer. A copy went to my bank's legal department. But I wasn't done. The courts move slowly. My investors move at the speed of light. Tessa, I said, I need you to help me build a website. For the rest of the night, we didn't sleep. We built what boundaries build. It was a simple, elegant, one-page site. No photos of me, no marketing, no emotional statements. The header just said, a factual record. Below, it was a series of links. Stonepier Operating Agreement, current. 241 Hemlock Deed of Ownership. Original loan repayment, redacted. Notarized partnership amendment, 6 years prior. Forensic accounting timeline, summary. You couldn't argue with it. It was just the documents. Scanned, searchable, cross-referenceable, the truth, in black and white. The next morning, I activated the transparency hotline Maddox had set up, manned by his paralegals. My email to my 3 paused tenants and my rescheduled investors was short. You have been contacted by third parties regarding a legal matter. I believe in total transparency. The complete, factual, and documented record of this matter is available for your review at whatboundariesbuild.com. We have also opened a factual inquiry hotline for any specific questions, which will be answered with corresponding documentation. I look forward to resuming our business. The market, which had been holding its breath, exhaled. The bank manager called first. Lydia, our legal team reviewed your motion. This is the most comprehensive counterfiling I've ever seen. The judge has scheduled an emergency hearing for tomorrow, but based on this, we're releasing the hold on your operating account. The TRO was clearly obtained in bad faith. The line of credit for the refi will have to wait for the judge's order, but your business is back online. My contractor, Frank, was back on site within an hour. The architecture firm sent an email. Thank you for the clarification. This is more than sufficient. Please send over the lease for final signature. I had survived. I had pushed back the darkness. The chokehold was broken. A deep, heavy silence fell. Vaughn Mercer did not respond to the filing. My mother, Cole, and Renee were silent. The smear campaign had stopped. It felt like the eye of the storm. We were all waiting for the judge's ruling, which was expected in the morning. Then, Friday afternoon, my inbox pinged. It was an Evite, a mass-market invitation, garish gold and black. Eleanor Walker and the Walker Family Heritage Fund request the pleasure of your company at the inaugural Legacy Gala. Join us as we celebrate the future of the Walker estate. Saturday evening, 7 o'clock, the penthouse at 241 North Hemlock. I looked at the invitation. They were still coming. They had filed a lawsuit to freeze my assets, and I had checkmated them with facts. And now, they were still planning to show up. They were proceeding with the PR ambush as if their legal case hadn't just been incinerated. They weren't just arrogant. They were stupid. They thought I would be so broken, so desperate from the lawsuit, that I would be defenseless. They thought they could still waltz in and perform their little play. I looked at my calendar. Saturday, at 7. I forwarded the invitation to Maddox, to the sheriff, and to Maria at Northlight Arts. My only message? The event is confirmed. Saturday, the day of the gala. I was in the third-floor operations room, a space with a one-way glass overlook of the main lobby. By 3 p.m., the building was quiet, the calm before the manufactured storm. My family was expecting me to be in a panic. They were expecting frantic calls, tearful pleading, or perhaps a furious, locked door. I gave them none of those. I had no intention of stopping them from afar. The cease and desist letters had been ignored. The court filings, though devastating, had not deterred them from this final, public performance. They had escalated this from a financial dispute to a physical occupation. My mother had thrown a rock. I had spent the last 72 hours building a mountain for it to shatter against. I was letting them walk, with all their performative victimhood, directly into a meticulously constructed, multi-layered legal trap. They wanted to stage a scene for the press. I was going to provide the stage, the lighting, and the script. The first layer of the trap was entirely procedural. At 9:01 a.m., Maria, the director of Northlight Arts, had sent a formal Notice of Scheduling Conflict and Security Concern to the Hemlock Hold co-management email. It was a masterpiece of professional concern. She stated that her organization, as the legally contracted tenant of record for the penthouse and lobby spaces, was alarmed by disquieting rumors of an unauthorized, large-scale event. She noted that her installation materials were scheduled for delivery and that this gala presented a direct material interference with her contracted rights. That email was printed, notarized by Maddox's team, and added to the file. It was now logged. My primary, innocent, non-profit tenant had officially filed a complaint before a single guest arrived. Down in the lobby, the evidence of our preparation was polished and waiting. The new bronze plaque gleamed under the spotlights. Building regulations for 241 North Hemlock. It was cold, corporate, and absolute. It explicitly stated the rule we had implemented. Gatherings of more than 10 persons required a certified event permit, full liability insurance naming Hemlock Holdco as additionally insured, and written approval from property management. No exceptions. Beside it, the QR code, framed in matching bronze, was waiting. I had tested it that morning. It was an act of aggressive transparency. It linked to the new Hemlock Holdco state filing. It linked to the public permit application forms. And most importantly, it linked to a redacted but legally binding copy of the Northlight Arts framework contract. The proof of their trespass was published before they even committed it. The human element of the trap arrived in stages. Maddox was on site by 5 p.m. He wasn't dressed as a lawyer. He was dressed as management, in a dark, impeccable suit that matched my executive security team. He was in the control room with me, a command center we had established. In his briefcase, he had a stack of documents, the Notice of Revocation of Permission to Assemble. It was a formal trespass warning, citing the building's explicit rules, the violation of the 10-person limit, the failure to provide a permit or insurance, and the direct tortious interference with the rights of the tenant of record. Northlight Arts. It was pre-signed by me. It just needed a timestamp. Ms. Alvarez, the notary public Maddox had retained, was set up in Noah's back office, her official logbook open on the desk. She was not just a notary. She was a process server. She was here to act as a state-certified witness, to timestamp the delivery of the notice, and to formalize the record. At 6 p.m., exactly as promised by the sheriff, Deputy Evans and a second deputy arrived. They were polished, professional, and understood the assignment perfectly. My meeting with the sheriff had been effective. They knew this was not a family squabble. This was the enforcement of a civil trespass order on private commercial property. Ms. Walker, Evans said, his voice a low monotone. Our body-worn cameras are active and recording. We will remain in the service corridor as requested until we are needed to keep the peace. They were my official, impartial witnesses. The building itself was the final piece, the physical trap. I had our chief engineer configure the electrical grid. This was the part I found most elegant. The building was not dark. All standard lights, the lobby chandeliers, the hallway sconces, the emergency exit signs were on. All standard 110-volt wall outlets were active, but the high-draw event package panels, the dedicated 200-amp circuits that caterers, sound engineers, and professional lighting crews rely on, were cold. To activate them required the two-factor digital signature from my encrypted device. My phone was staying in my pocket. They could have a party, but they would have to do it with the same power limitations as a college dorm room. Noah stood at his post, a new security podium installed just inside the doors. His posture was rigid. He had been tricked once. He would not be tricked again. His instructions were a simple, 3-step, non-confrontational process. Scan, cross-reference, log. Good evening. Welcome to 241 North Hemlock. This is a private commercial building. For our records, I just need to scan your invitation. He held a tablet. He would scan the QR code on their tacky Evite. His screen, which I could see mirrored on my own monitor, was programmed to cross-reference that code with the building's actual event calendar. It would flash red. Event not registered, no permit, no insurance. He would then tap a single button, logging their entry, one tap, a time-stamped, digital record of every single person who willfully ignored the posted rules and entered the building. At 6:30, the first violators arrived, the caterers. Where are the junction boxes? The 220 outlets? The catering captain barked at Noah. Noah read from his script, his voice steady. "The building's high-voltage panels are not authorized for use this evening. Only standard 110-volt outlets are available. You'll have to manage." The man swore, looking at his induction burners and hot boxes. They were now just metal boxes. He furiously ordered his staff to run extension cords from the wall, daisy-chaining power strips in a flagrant fire code violation, which my cameras dutifully recorded. At 6:45, my brother Cole arrived. He had his arm around a man carrying a heavy audio rack. "Right here," Cole announced, gesturing to the main alcove. "This is where the DJ booth goes. We need massive sound." They began to set up. The DJ's laptop and mixing board lit up, powered by the wall socket, but when he tried to fire up his main amplifiers, the 2,000-watt speakers, nothing. The internal circuits clicked, flashed red, and died. He tried another outlet. Same result. "What the hell? Cole?" the DJ hissed. "There's no juice. I can't power the subs. I can barely run the monitors." "It's an old building, man. The wiring is probably bad," Cole said. A perfect encapsulation of his ignorance. "Just run it off the strip. Turn it up." They would get perhaps 10% of their expected volume. The Gala would have the audio fidelity of a cheap Bluetooth speaker. At 6:50, Renee swept in with her entourage. They were wheeling a large, freestanding photo booth. On the side, in that same gaudy gold script, was a logo I had never authorized: the estate of Walker. In the control room, Maddox didn't even look at me. He spoke to his paralegal. "Timestamp that, 6:51 p.m., unauthorized use of a fictitious business name. Estate of Walker, implying ownership. It's trademark infringement on top of the trespass." The paralegal typed. Guests began to arrive in earnest. Aunts, uncles, old family friends, even some minor local business figures Eleanor wanted to impress. Each one was met by Noah. Each one was scanned. Each one was logged. The digital counter on my screen ticked up. 10 people, 20, 35. At 7:05, the real payload arrived. My uncle's consultant, Mr. Vance, walked in, shaking hands with a woman I recognized as a society reporter from the Riverton Gazette. A photographer was with her. They were here to document my humiliation, to take the picture of me being served the lawsuit, surrounded by my angry family. They were bringing their own witnesses to their own defeat. Finally, at 7:15, the orchestrator, my mother, Eleanor, made her grand entrance. She was in a floor-length red silk gown, as if she were the queen of the ball. She was radiant. She was triumphant. She held a small, leather-bound folder under her arm, her speech, her public demand for her fair share. She walked straight past Noah, offering him a dismissive, airy wave, as if he were a bellhop. He didn't challenge her. He just aimed his tablet at her back and tapped the screen. Entry logged. Eleanor Walker, 7:16 p.m. The system count, displayed in the corner of my monitor, ticked up as a final cluster of Renee's friends pushed through the door. 48, 49, 50. 2 more guests. 52. 52, I said, my voice perfectly level in the quiet, dark room. 52 individuals, in violation of the posted 10-person limit, no permit, no insurance, and in direct conflict with a contracted tenant. I looked at Maddox. He nodded once. He picked up his radio. "Ms. Alvarez, Deputy Evans, we are active. Please proceed to the lobby. The time is 7:17 p.m. The trap was sprung. I stood up from the console in the third-floor operations room. Below, in the lobby, the party was reaching its peak. The counter on my monitor read 52. 52 trespassers. Maddox, seeing my movement, nodded once and spoke quietly into his radio, signaling the ground team to move into their positions at the exits. I picked up the master microphone for the building's public address system. My thumb depressed the all-call button. A soft, pneumatic click echoed in the small, dark room, followed by the two-tone chime that now sounded in the lobby, the penthouse, and every corridor. On my monitor, I watched the scene below freeze. The weak, tinny thumping of the DJ's underpowered speakers stopped. Guests paused with glasses halfway to their lips. My mother, Eleanor, who had just raised her champagne flute to begin her triumphant speech, looked up at the ceiling, her smile frozen, a mask of pure confusion. My voice, amplified, calm, and stripped of all emotion, filled every inch of the space. Good evening. This is Lydia Walker. I am the sole owner of Hemlock Holdco LLC, the legal entity that owns this property. A nervous titter went through the crowd. The reporter from the Gazette was already scribbling in her notepad. This is a formal announcement, I continued. The gathering currently taking place in the lobby and penthouse of 241 North Hemlock is an unauthorized event. It is in direct violation of the posted building regulations, which expressly limit unauthorized gatherings to 10 persons. You have exceeded this limit by more than 5 times. You have failed to secure an event permit. You have failed to provide the mandatory liability insurance. As of this moment, you are all trespassing on private commercial property. The silence in the lobby was now absolute. A formal notice of revocation of permission to assemble has been emailed to the known organizers. A physical copy, notarized and witnessed, is also being served at this time. For clarification on your status, I said, my hand moving to the next control on my console. Please direct your attention to the main lobby display. I hit the macro. The 16-foot digital art screen that dominated the lobby flickered. The placid, abstract blue swirls were replaced by a high-resolution, scanned document. This is Exhibit A, my voice announced, as if I were leading a boardroom presentation. The general warranty deed for 241 North Hemlock. I digitally zoomed in on the grantee box. As you can see, the sole owner is Hemlock Holdco LLC, a subsidiary of Stone Pier Development. There is no mention of an estate of Walker. I clicked to the next slide. This is Exhibit B, the current state-filed operating agreement for Stone Pier Development. As you will see highlighted, the sole managing member, with 100% ownership, is Lydia Walker. I clicked again. This is Exhibit C, a time-stamped bank transfer confirmation, dated 6 years ago, for $15,000, plus an additional $1,500 interest payment. The transfer is from Stone Pier Development to Eleanor Walker, representing a full and final repayment of her initial seed loan. I let that image hang for a full 5 seconds. I saw the reporter's photographer lift his camera and snap a picture of the screen. I clicked one last time, and this is Exhibit D, the notarized, state-filed amendment to the Articles of Organization. It is signed by Eleanor Walker. It legally and irrevocably terminates any and all association she had with the company 6 years ago. A low, horrified murmur began to spread. Guests were turning to look at my mother, whose face had gone from confused to ashen. My mother, the organizer of this event, has claimed a foundational role in this company. My voice continued, steady and cold. She has claimed this building is family heritage. The truth is somewhat different. I hit the next macro. The screen split into 4 quadrants, displaying silent, time-stamped security footage. What you are now seeing is security footage from the past 3 weeks. Here, I highlighted the first quadrant, is my brother, Cole, using a voided code to access the 3rd floor, measuring the walls of a space that is already under lease to another tenant. Here, I highlighted the second, is my sister, Renee, giving an unauthorized tour to her friends, claiming the 2nd floor for her own use. And here, I highlighted the third, is my mother, Eleanor, and Mr. Vance, the consultant, standing by the pillar, using fraudulent paperwork to gain access to the utility basements 2 weeks ago, to which they were escorted by a manager who no longer works here. The silent video of them plotting, measuring, and trespassing played on a loop. They weren't visitors. They were casing the joint. This unauthorized gathering, I went on, my voice hardening, is not just a violation of building rules. It is an active and tortious interference with a paying, contracted tenant. The screen changed again. A new document appeared, This one with the Northlight Arts logo at the top. This is a framework contract between Hemlock Holdco and the Northlight Arts nonprofit organization. This contract was signed before your gala was announced. As of 48 hours ago, Northlight Arts is the legal tenant of record for this penthouse and lobby space for the entire weekend. For a scheduled installation, your presence here tonight is actively preventing them from their work. You are not just trespassing against me, you are trespassing against a community arts program. The reporter's head whipped around to look at Eleanor. This was the story. Not a family dispute. It was wealthy socialite sabotages local nonprofit. Finally, I said, many of you were invited here to support a fair division of assets. You have been told a story of injustice. I would like to offer a final correction. I paused, then switched microphone channels. Tessa, you can speak now. Tessa, who had been standing quietly near the back wall next to one of my paralegals, stepped forward. She was trembling, but she held her phone in a steady hand. Her voice, now patched into the PA system, was quiet but clear. I am Lydia's cousin, she said, her voice echoing in the cavernous room. I was at the planning meetings for this party. I have been listening. She unlocked her phone and began to read. A direct text from my Aunt Eleanor, dated 2 weeks ago. Just need to apply pressure. The refi is her weak spot. We have to force her to settle before the papers are signed. A collective gasp. Tessa continued. A text from my Uncle Robert to Mr. Vance. Vaughn says if we can just tie her up in court for 60 days, the bank will call her loans, make her bleed cash. She'll have to settle for a piece. And one more. From Eleanor to Cole. I don't care about the building. I care about control. We will break her. The lobby was dead silent. The guests, my extended family, Eleanor's society friends, looked at my mother with a new, dawning horror. They were not guests. They were props. They were accomplices in a documented, premeditated conspiracy to commit extortion. Lies, Cole roared. His face was blotchy and red, a cornered animal. She's lying. That's fake. You bitch! He was desperate, blinded by rage. He lunged, not at Tessa, but at the nearest object of value. It was a tall, delicate sculpture pedestal, part of the Northlight exhibit that had been delivered that afternoon. He shoved it with all his strength. The pedestal toppled, and a large, framed abstract painting crashed face down onto the marble floor. The sound of shattering glass was like a gunshot in the silence. Before the last piece of glass had settled, Deputy Evans was moving. He didn't run. He walked, placing his body directly between Cole and the destroyed artwork. Sir, step back, now. Evans was calm, his voice pure procedure. He unclipped his radio. Dispatch. This is Evans at 241 North Hemlock. I have an active destruction of property. Code 245. Male, white, approximate age 35. Suspect is contained and is not cooperative. He looked at Cole, then at the broken frame. You are being cited for willful destruction of property. I need you to place your hands on the wall. Cole froze, the rage instantly draining from his face, replaced by a sudden, childish panic. As the second deputy moved to handle Cole, Maddox stepped into the center of the room. He was no longer a guest. He was counsel. In addition to the civil trespass and the destruction of private property, Maddox announced, his voice cutting through the tension, I am hereby serving notice to Renee Walker and Eleanor Walker for state and federal trademark infringement. He pointed a long, damning finger at the photo booth in the corner. The logo, The Estate of Walker, is a fictitious and fraudulent business name designed to imply ownership of this property and to dilute the registered trademark of Stone Pier Development. All damages arising from this infringement, including all profits from your associated blogs, will be pursued. Renee's blogger friends, who had been live streaming the gala to their followers, suddenly pointed their phones at the floor. Their streams, which had been meant to show a family's solidarity, were now capturing the audio of a complete legal and social immolation. I took the microphone for the last time. My voice was steady, Final. You have been presented with the facts. You are on private property, interfering with a legal tenant, and you are trespassing. You have 15 minutes to vacate the premises. On cue, the notary public, Ms. Alvarez, stepped forward with Deputy Evans. She held up the printed, notarized trespass order. By the authority of Hemlock Holdco LLC, owner of record, she began to read in a loud, clear monotone. This assembly is declared unlawful. You are hereby ordered to disperse. Failure to comply within the specified 15 minutes will result in your individual arrest for criminal trespass under state statute. That was the final straw. The dam broke. The guests didn't walk. They fled. The reporter and her photographer were the first ones out the door, racing to file the story of the year, the family friends, the business acquaintances, the distant cousins. They streamed out, a tidal wave of shame, faces averted, refusing to make eye contact with Eleanor. They had been invited to a party. They had become witnesses. In less than 10 minutes, the lobby was a graveyard of abandoned champagne flutes and half-eaten appetizers. The only people left were the caterers, who were frantically packing, the defeated DJ, and my core family. Cole was standing by the wall, receiving his citation from the deputy. Renee was near her photo booth, openly weeping. Eleanor stood alone. Her red dress looked garish and absurd under the harsh white utility lights, which I had just switched on. Her gala was over. I walked down the main staircase, Maddox at my side. I stopped 10 feet from her. She looked up at me, the arrogance and triumph completely gone, replaced by a raw, desperate haggling. "Lydia," she said, her voice hoarse, This is too much. It doesn't have to be this way." She even tried to smile. Just the second floor. Let Cole have the third. You give us the second floor, and we can make all of this go away." I looked at her. I looked at the broken glass on my floor. I looked at the legal and financial wreckage she had tried to inflict. "No," I said. My voice was quiet, but it was the only sound in the marble hall. "There are no negotiations. You cannot negotiate with property that does not belong to you. You are on someone else's property. Eleanor." I paused, then delivered the final, simple truth. "And now you have to leave." Maddox gestured to the open door. Deputy Evans took a single, pointed step toward her. She had no moves left. She turned. Her shoulders slumped, and walked out of my building. The lobby was a still life of defeat. The air hung thick with the metallic tang of spilled champagne and the faint, dusty smell of shattered glass. My executive security team, their presence no longer a quiet deterrent but a visible occupation, stood at the doors. The caterers, desperate to avoid being implicated, had vanished in a clatter of stacked metal and scraped dollies. In the center of the room, Ms. Alvarez, the notary, was performing the final rites. She took a pristine, uncreased copy of the gaudy Walker Legacy Gala invitation and with a heavy-duty stapler, physically attached it to the front of her notarized report of violation and service. The document listed the time, 7:17 p.m. It listed the violation, unauthorized gathering in excess of the 10-person limit. It listed the code violation, the daisy-chained power strips. It listed the tenant complaint from Northlight Arts. It listed the names of the deputies who had witnessed the service of the trespass order. It was a perfect, self-contained packet of evidence. This, along with my logbook and the deputy's body camera footage, Ms. Alvarez said, sliding the packet into a fresh evidence bag for Maddox, will be unassailable. Cole was gone, having accepted his citation for destruction of property with a final, pathetic glare of hatred. Renee had scurried out behind him, dragging her now infamous photo booth. My mother, Eleanor, had been the last to leave, a silent, spectral figure in a red dress, disappearing into the Riverton night. "Noah," I said, turning to my building manager. He looked exhausted, but he was standing taller. "Get the cleanup crew, full sweep, and call the glazier. I want that painting and pedestal assessed for repairs by morning." Yes, Ms. Walker, he said. He looked at me, a new, hard-won respect in his eyes. That was thorough. It was procedure, I said. From now on, we only follow procedure. Maddox and I retreated to the third-floor operations room. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind the clean, cold hum of strategic closure. The gala is done, I said, watching the cleanup crews mop slicks on the marble floor below. The trespass is documented. The refi is still on ice. Not for long, Maddox said. He was already on his laptop, his fingers flying. The emergency hearing on our motion to dissolve the TRO is at 9 a.m. tomorrow, and I'm adding a little something to the file. He began dictating to his paralegal, who was taking notes on a separate laptop. Addendum to the motion to dismiss. File for sanctions against Plaintiff Eleanor Walker and Plaintiff's counsel, Vaughn Mercer, pursuant to state code. He was going nuclear. And he dictated, for the filing of a frivolous, non-meritorious lawsuit for the express and documented purpose of extortion. He tapped the scans of Tessa's notebook. 2. For material misrepresentation to the court. Plaintiff and counsel knowingly presented voided obsolete documents as proof of ownership in their ex parte motion. He paused, a rare cold anger in his voice. 3. For suborning perjury, Plaintiff Eleanor Walker's sworn affidavit contains statements of implied partnership that are directly contradicted by 6 years of legal and financial records, including her own tax filings, and 4. For a catastrophic abuse of the judicial process, resulting in material damages to Hemlock Holdco LLC and Stone Pier Development, including the intentional sabotage of a multi-million-dollar financing deal. He looked at me. We're not just asking for a dismissal, we're asking for the judge to make them pay, for our legal fees, for the cost of the security, for the damage to the painting, for every single dollar this stunt cost you. The first dominoes began to fall the next morning, even before the hearing. My first call was to Maria at Northlight Arts. Maria, I said, I am profoundly sorry for what your team had to witness, and for the damage to your property. Stone Pier will, of course, cover the full cost of the repair and restoration of the artwork, and in addition, I'm sending a corporate donation of $10,000 to Northlight's Community Fund, as a formal apology for the disruption. She was quiet for a moment. Lydia, you don't have to do that. You were the victim here. I know, I said, but your organization was my shield. That has value. I honor my partners. All I ask is that if the Riverton Gazette calls you, you tell them the truth. The truth? Maria said. The truth is that 241 Hemlock gave us a home when no one else would, and a high society bully tried to wreck it. I'll be happy to give them a statement. She was as good as her word. The 2 local blogs that had gleefully posted Renee's tearful video had already been served with the new, explosive evidence from the gala. At 8:30 a.m., both blogs posted full-page retractions. An apology to Stone Pier Development. One headline read, Our previous story on the Walker family dispute was based on documents that have since been proven to be expired and void. We were provided with misleading information. We have reviewed the official court filings, including the notarized amendment and the forensic accounting timeline, and retract our previous story in its entirety. We apologize to Ms. Lydia Walker and Stone Pier Development for the error. The narrative was officially dead. At 9:15 a.m., Maddox called me from the courthouse. I was in my office, watching my inbox. It's done, he said. The words were clipped. The TRO? Dissolved with prejudice, Maddox said. The judge was incandescent. Vaughn Mercer didn't even try to argue. He just stood there. The judge read my motion for sanctions, looked at the pictures of Tessa's notebook, and then read Mercer the riot act for 10 straight minutes. He called his conduct a disgrace to the bar. The motion to dismiss the entire lawsuit is scheduled for next week, but it's a formality. He told them to withdraw it, or he'll grant our sanctions in full. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The chokehold was gone. At 9:30 a.m., as if on a timer, My commercial loan officer from the bank called. His voice, which had been sick with apology 2 days ago, was now buoyant, almost fawning. "Lydia," he said, "I just received the court order. The TRO is dissolved. The hold on your accounts is gone. But more to the point, our legal team reviewed the entire file you sent over, the deed transfer, the process server's report, the Northlight lease, the works. I have to be honest, I've never seen such a thorough, proactive, and brilliant piece of risk management." "So we're clear to close?" I asked, cutting to the point. "We are clear to close," he confirmed. "The line of credit is fully restored. The refinancing is on. Our underwriting team, well, frankly, they're more confident in this deal than they were before. They said, and I quote, 'She's indestructible.'" The dam had broken. The 3 investors who had postponed their meetings all confirmed new times within the hour. But the call that mattered came at noon. It was from a new number, a Chicago exchange. "Is this Lydia Walker?" a crisp, energetic voice asked. My name is Amanda Chen. I'm a principal at Kestrel Equity Partners. We're a new growth fund out of Chicago. I just read the Riverton Gazette story about what happened at your building Saturday night. Then I read the blog retractions. Then I pulled the court filings. I want to be clear. Ms. Walker, we don't invest in assets. We invest in managers. And we believe we just watched a masterclass in governance and asset protection." I sat up straighter. "I appreciate the call, Ms. Chen. We'd like to fly in tomorrow," she said. "We're not interested in your original refi terms. We think they're an insult. We're prepared to offer a full capital partnership on your next 3 acquisitions. Better terms, lower interest, higher leverage. Because we now know, with 100% certainty, that our investment will be protected, not just by contracts, but by a founder who actually enforces them." I had not just survived, I had become more valuable. The consequences for my family were not legal, not yet. They were practical. They were immediate. Tessa, who was now my de facto head of risk and communications, brought me the news. "Cole just received the invoice from Northlight's insurance carrier," she said, holding up a printout. The painting was a commissioned piece. The pedestal was custom. Total damages, $34,000. The citation for property destruction made him fully liable. He would be paying it off for a decade. And Renee, Tessa scrolled through her phone. It's bad. Her 2 biggest brand deals just dropped her. The Moms and Mindfulness one, and that organic baby food company. They both posted statements. "We are a family-first brand and cannot be associated with the individuals involved in the recent deplorable events at 241 North Hemlock." Her live stream of her own humiliation was the last straw. The final, most elegant cut, however, was delivered by Maddox. He stopped by my office at the end of the day. "One last piece of housekeeping," he said, placing a small, sealed envelope on my desk. I was reviewing Eleanor's affidavit again, the one where she swore under oath that she was an implied partner, entitled to a significant equity stake from the moment of her $15,000 investment. And, Maddox said, a thin, cruel smile playing on his lips. It occurred to me that if she truly believed that, she would have been declaring that implied equity and its growth as a personal asset on her tax returns for the last 6 years. But I suspect she has not. I suspect she has been claiming to be a simple, private citizen, while telling a judge she's a corporate partner. He tapped the envelope. "This is an anonymous, formal tip to the Internal Revenue Service. It simply poses the question. It attaches her sworn affidavit and suggests they might want to cross-reference it with her filed returns. When the government accuses you of perjury, it's a problem. When it accuses you of tax fraud, it's a religion." I looked at the envelope. He had turned her own lies into a weapon, aimed directly at her foundations. The work of that night, and the days that followed, was one of hardening. The refi closed, the new partnership with Kestrel was signed, and Stone Pier changed. I didn't just retrain, I rebuilt. The new security protocol was absolute. The mechanical rooms, The data closets, the elevator control rooms, across all my properties, were retrofitted. No more codes, no more master fobs. We implemented a full biometric scanning system, fingerprints and retina scans, tied directly to the employee database. The only way you could get into my building's brain was if the system knew, with biological certainty, that you belonged there. The final change was in the lobby. I had the temporary bronze plaque removed, the one that listed the rules, the one that was a reaction to the threat. I replaced it with a statement. It was installed in the exact spot where Eleanor had tried to hang her banner. It was cast in 3-inch thick bronze, the letters deep and permanent. It was the first thing you saw when you walked in. It was not a rule, it was a philosophy. Boundaries build empires. The courtroom was not the grand, oak-paneled chamber of television drama. It was a functional, charmless, fluorescent-lit room on the 12th floor of the county courthouse. It was a place for administrative hearings, for foreclosures, for the unglamorous, procedural end of things. It was the perfect venue for an execution. We sat on the right, my side, me, in a severe charcoal gray suit. Maddox, his posture immaculate, and 2 paralegals. Behind us sat Mr. Singh, the forensic accountant, and Tessa, who was here as a witness and as my head of communications. We were a silent, organized row of binders and facts. On the left, they were a mess. Eleanor, in a funereal black suit, looked diminished, her usual radiance snuffed out by the bad lighting. Cole sat beside her, vibrating with a resentment he could barely contain. Renee was on the end, visibly blotchy, dabbing at her eyes. Their lawyer, Vaughn Mercer, shuffled his papers, his face a sallow mask of professional anxiety. He had been checkmated days ago, and he knew it. This was just the formality of knocking over the king. The judge, a sharp, older woman named Kennelly, entered. She didn't waste time. She sat, put on her glasses, and looked at the pile of motions before her. "Good morning," she said, her voice like gravel. "We are here for case 2024 CV 1098, Walker Vici, Walker and Stone Pier Development. We are here on the defendant's motion to dismiss and motion for sanctions. I have read all 12 inches of the filings from both sides. Frankly, I have read more than enough." She looked at Vaughn Mercer. "Mr. Mercer, your entire case hinges on a claim of implied partnership. You filed an ex parte motion to freeze millions of dollars in assets based on this claim. The defendant has filed a comprehensive, evidence-based motion to dismiss. Before I rule, I want you to explain to me, in simple terms, why I should not grant their motion and sanction you back to the Stone Age." Vaughn Mercer stood. He was a performer, and this was his last, desperate stage. He tried to project warmth, to invoke the very family drama we had refused to engage in. "Your Honor, this is not a simple case of contracts. This is a case of family. This is about a mother, my client, Eleanor Walker, who provided the foundational, catalytic seed money." "The $15,000, the judge interrupted, not looking up. "The $15,000, yes, but more than that, Your Honor. Her guidance, her mentorship, her name, the sweat equity that built an empire. The law recognizes implied partnerships. It recognizes when one party, through fraud and manipulation," he jested at me, "unjustly enriches herself at the expense of the partner who made it all possible. This document they keep waving around. This amendment. It was a simple formality, a corporate cleanup, not a dissolution of a foundational partnership." He was still talking when Maddox stood. "Your Honor," Maddox said, his voice cutting through Mercer's performance like a wire. Mercer stopped, mid-sentence. "Mr. Mercer calls this a simple formality," Maddox said. He gestured to the projector. One of his paralegals hit a key. A high-resolution scan of the notarized amendment filled the wall. "This is not a formality. This is a contract. It is a state-filed, notarized, and legally binding instrument, signed by his client. It explicitly terminates any and all association, and it was signed 6 years ago." He switched the slide. This is the acquisition timeline for every asset in dispute. 241 North Hemlock, the River North Lofts, the West Loop office complex, all of them. He used a laser pointer. Acquired 1, 3, and 5 years after this document was signed. He turned to Mr. Singh. Mr. Singh, you are the forensic accountant who audited the defendant's books? I am, Singh said. And you prepared this timeline? I did. Your Honor, Maddox continued, Mr. Mercer claims his client's money was foundational. Mr. Singh, please tell the court, how much of Eleanor Walker's money, direct or indirect, was used in the acquisition of any of these properties? Singh's voice was quiet, but it filled the room. $0 All acquisitions were funded by revenue generated by Stone Pier development, or by commercial loans collateralized by those revenues, all of which originated years after Mrs. Walker's legal separation from the company. Vaughn Mercer was on his feet. Objection. This ignores the intangible value, Sit down. Mr. Mercer, Judge Kennelly snapped. You sued for a financial stake. He is showing me the financial record. The only person ignoring anything here is you. Proceed, Miss Hale. Maddox nodded. Thank you. Your Honor, Mr. Mercer claims this is a good faith dispute. We will now prove it is a bad faith conspiracy. The slide changed. The first page of Tessa's notarized affidavit appeared, followed by the first scanned page of her handwritten notebook. This is the sworn testimony of Tessa Walker, Maddox said. She was present at the plaintiff's planning meetings. Maddox began to read. Quote, just need to apply pressure. The refi is her weak spot. Quote, a judge will see family and force them to mediate. That's when we get our peace. Quote, Vaughn says if we can just tie her up for 60 days, the bank will call her loans, make her bleed cash. She'll have to settle for a peace. A paralegal from Mercer's office actually gasped. Cole looked at the floor. Eleanor's eyes were squeezed shut. This is not the language of a partner seeking her rights, Maddox said, his voice echoing in the dead silent room. This is the language of an extortionist. This is proof of intent to commit commercial sabotage. This entire lawsuit is a manufactured crisis, filed in bad faith. And finally, Maddox said, when their legal attack was exposed and neutralized, the plaintiffs escalated. They escalated from a frivolous filing to a physical crime. The slide changed. The courtroom was filled with the video from the gala. It was a 1-minute supercut. It showed the Estate of Walker logo on the photo booth. It showed the 52 guests. It showed Cole, his face purple with rage, shoving the pedestal. It showed the painting shattering. It showed Ms. Alvarez reading the trespass order. And it ended with the final, damning frame. Eleanor, standing amid the wreckage, pleading, Just the second floor. The video went dark. Maddox let the silence sit for a beat. These are not the actions of a partner, Your Honor. These are the actions of a trespasser, a vandal, and a saboteur. This case is not just without merit. It is an insult to this court. We ask for dismissal, with prejudice. We ask for sanctions, and we ask for a permanent restraining order to protect my client's business from her family. The evidence speaks for itself. Maddox sat down. Judge Kennelly took off her glasses. She cleaned them, slowly, deliberately. She did not look at the lawyers. She looked directly at my mother. Mrs. Walker, she said, her voice dangerously quiet. Please stand up. Vaughn Mercer started to rise. Your Honor, I advise my... Sit down, Mr. Mercer. I am not speaking to you. Eleanor stood. She was trembling. A stark, diminished figure. Mrs. Walker, the judge said, I have read your affidavit, in which you swore under oath that you were an implied partner. I have seen the notarized document, signed by you, that says you are not. I have seen the financial records that show you contributed nothing to the assets you claim to own. I have read the notes from your meetings, where you plan to make her bleed cash. I have seen you on video, trespassing in a building you do not own after your lawsuit was filed. She leaned forward. I have a simple, final question for you. Your lawsuit claims you are seeking your legal rights as a partner. The evidence, all of it, suggests you were seeking to apply pressure to force a settlement. So, which is it, Mrs. Walker? Before this court, were you seeking rights, or were you seeking leverage? It was a perfect trap. If she said rights, she was perjuring herself against the evidence of Tessa's notebook. If she said leverage or pressure, she was admitting to the extortion. Eleanor's face crumpled. The mask of the matriarch, the businesswoman, the victim, it all dissolved. She was just a woman, caught. I... Her voice was a ragged whisper. He's my son. She's my daughter. It was family. I just wanted what was fair. What was fair, the judge pressed, or what you could take. Were you seeking rights, Mrs. Walker, or were you applying pressure? Eleanor broke. I don't know. That is what I thought, the judge said. She looked at Vaughn Mercer. Sit down, Mrs. Walker. She picked up her gavel. The court finds that the plaintiff's case is not just without merit. It is a textbook example of a frivolous, malicious, and vexatious filing. It is a demonstrable abuse of the judicial process. It was filed for the sole, improper purpose of inflicting financial duress on the defendant to extort a settlement to which the plaintiff has no legal right. Gavel. The defendant's motion to dismiss is granted, with prejudice. This claim can never be filed in any court again. Gavel. The defendant's motion for sanctions is granted in full. The plaintiffs, Eleanor Walker, Cole Walker, and Renee Walker, are hereby ordered, jointly and severally, to pay the defendant's complete and documented legal fees. You will pay for Mr. Hale's time. You will pay for Mr. Singh's time. You will pay for the court reporters. You will pay for the process servers. You will pay for the $34,000 painting your son destroyed. You will pay for every cent this circus cost. Gavel. Furthermore, this court issues an immediate permanent restraining order. Eleanor, Cole, and Renee Walker are prohibited from contacting, harassing, or communicating with Lydia Walker, her employees, her tenants, or her financial partners. You are prohibited from setting foot within 500 yards of 241 North Hemlock or any other property listed in the Stone Pier portfolio. A violation will mean your immediate arrest. Gavel. Finally, any and all liens, lis pendens, or spurious UCC-1 filings placed on the defendant's properties are declared null and void and are to be immediately expunged from the record. Mr. Mercer, you have 24 hours to file the withdrawal notices, or I will hold you in contempt and file a formal grievance with the State Bar. This hearing is concluded. The final gavel strike echoed like a gunshot. It was over. We stood. Maddox and his team packed their binders with crisp, efficient movements. It was an administrative cleanup. On the other side of the aisle, there was only wreckage. Renee was sobbing into her hands. Cole looked like he had been hollowed out. Eleanor was staring at the judge's empty chair, her face a blank mask of disbelief. Vaughn Mercer was stuffing papers into his briefcase, refusing to look at the family he had just led off a cliff. We walked out, Maddox first, then me, then Tessa. The moment we cleared the courtroom doors, we were hit by the flashbulbs. The reporter from the Gazette was there, along with 2 other local news crews. They had clearly been fed the ruling. Ms. Walker, Ms. Walker, the reporter shouted, shoving a microphone in my face. Do you have any comment on the judge's ruling? Your mother has been sanctioned. What do you have to say to your family? I kept my pace steady. I did not stop. I did not look at them. I did not smile. This was not a victory. It was a termination. Maddox held up a hand. No comment. But as I passed the main camera, I did one thing. I shifted the heavy, bound dossier I was carrying. The one I had taken to the bank, to the sheriff, and to this courtroom. I lifted it, almost casually, so the cover was facing the lens, the light glinting off the gold-embossed title. Boundaries Build Empires. I let them take their picture. I let the evidence speak for me. Then I walked past them, through the revolving doors, and into the clean, cold, quiet afternoon. I did not go back to my office. I went straight to the bank. I walked into the commercial lending tower, not as a defendant, but as the principal of a proven, indestructible asset. The papers for the refinancing were waiting. The deal that my family had tried to incinerate was now better than ever. The underwriters, having seen the entire, chaotic, and ultimately successful stress test of my ownership, had not only approved the deal, but had lowered the interest rate by 0.5 point. I signed the final documents that afternoon. The refi was closed. The new capital, millions of dollars, was secured. The bridge loan paid off, and the future of Stonepier was locked. The ink from my pen was still wet when my phone rang. It was Amanda Chen from Kestrel Equity Partners. "I saw the court wire," she said, her voice brisk. "Dismissed with prejudice. Sanctions granted. Congratulations. Our Jetlands in Riverton at 7. Dinner?" "Dinner," I said. "I'll book the table." I didn't go to dinner. Not yet. I had one last piece of business. I had won the legal war. I had won the financial war. Now I had to win the narrative war. At 4 p.m., I had Tessa send a simple, one-line invitation to the Riverton Gazette, the 2 repentant bloggers, and every major financial journalist in the city. "You've heard the stories. You've read the filings. Now, see the truth. Announcing the 241 North Hemlock Transparency Tour, 5 p.m., today, the lobby." When I arrived at the building, the press was already there. The same reporter who had shoved a microphone in my face at the courthouse was standing, notepad ready, in my lobby. My lobby. It was clean. The glass replaced. The floor gleaming. "Ms. Walker?" she said, her tone professional, all the gossip chasing gone. "This is an unusual move. What tour is this?" "This," I said, gesturing for Noah to open the doors, "is a tour of the facts." For the next hour, I walked them through the building. I was not a victim. I was not a daughter. I was a developer. "This is the 3rd floor," I said, showing them the empty, light-filled space. "It is leased to a firm, on a 10-year contract. It was never available. Any claim to it was a fiction." I took them to the 2nd floor. "This space is under active build-out for a corporate tenant. It was never available." I showed them the new biometric scanner outside the utility room. "This is our new standard. Our infrastructure is not vulnerable to social engineering." We ended in the lobby. I stood beside the new bronze plaque. "Boundaries build empires." The reporter looked at me. "Your family? Your mother claimed you stole her legacy." I pointed to the wall opposite the sign. "That's where they hung their banner. Walker Family Estate Planning. This is the real legacy." I had Tessa mount a simple, framed display. On the left, a sample. Blank lease agreement for a commercial tenant. In the middle, a sample insurance rider, requiring a $10 million umbrella. On the right, a sample, blank, notarized partnership amendment. "My legacy isn't blood," I said, my voice echoing in the marble hall. "It is contracts. It is procedure. It is clarity. Stonepier's legacy is that our documents are as solid as our foundations. This tour is simple. You've asked questions. Here." I tapped the glass of the display. "Are the documented answers. They are the same answers I gave my investors, and they are the same answers I gave the judge. There is no other story. There is only the truth." It was as I was finishing my final sentence that the front door opened. The press, the security team, we all turned. It was Eleanor. She was not in her funereal black suit. She was in her everyday, expensive cashmere, as if she were stopping by on her way from lunch. She was flanked by 2 of her oldest, most loyal friends, 2 women who had been at the gala and fled. They were not here as family. They were here as moral support, a desperate, final attempt at a social intervention. She saw the reporters, the cameras. This was not what she expected. She had come for one last, emotional, mother-daughter confrontation. She had come to plead, or to scream, or to cry. She saw me, standing calm and composed by my new bronze sign. "Lydia," she said. Her voice was thin, but it was edged with that old familiar tone of command. This has gone far enough. These people need to leave. We are your family. We need to talk." I did not raise my voice. I did not move toward her. I looked at her, and for the first time, I felt nothing. Not anger, not betrayal, not sadness, just finality. I gestured to Maddox, who had been standing by the concierge desk. He stepped forward. He was not a lawyer. He was a messenger. He was holding a large, 9x12 manila envelope. "Eleanor," I said. My voice was quiet, but it was amplified by the silence of the room. "There is nothing to talk about. We are not family, not anymore. We are a closed legal matter." Maddox stepped in front of her. Her two friends visibly recoiled. "Mrs. Walker," Maddox said, his voice polite, procedural. "On behalf of Hemlock Holdco, I am serving you with this packet." He handed it to her. She took it, her hand trembling. "This is your copy," I explained, as she fumbled with the clasp. "For your records, it contains a certified copy of the judge's final ruling. It contains a certified copy of the sanctions you now owe. It contains a certified, map-quested copy of the 500-yard restraining order. So there is no confusion about where you are legally allowed to be. And finally, it contains a simple, printed invitation to leave this property immediately, as your presence here is a violation of that order." She looked up from the papers, her face a ruin. The reporters were silent, their cameras rolling, capturing this final, quiet, devastating exchange. This was not a party. This was not a fight. This was her eviction. You can't," she whispered, appealing not to me, but to the reporters, to her friends. "Noah," I said, over my shoulder. My building manager stepped forward. "Noah," she hissed, tell her." Noah stopped 5 feet from her. He looked at me, then back at her. "Mrs. Walker," he said. His voice was steady. "I'm sorry, but from now on, we follow procedure, and procedure." He gestured to the open door. "Says you have to leave." Her friends had already abandoned her, melting out the door. She stood there, alone in the center of the lobby, clutching the packet of her own defeat. She gave me one last look. It was a look of such profound, bottomless hatred that it was almost pitiful. Then she turned, and she was gone. The aftermath was quiet. It was about rebuilding. I had dinner with Amanda Chen. Kestrel Equity Partners didn't just refinance my next 2 deals. They co-invested. Their terms were better than any I had ever been offered. They said they weren't just investing in my assets. They were investing in my risk management. Northlight Arts became the permanent cultural partner for 241 Hemlock, their first official exhibit. Fracture/Reframe, featuring the very painting Cole had destroyed, was a massive success. The penthouse was no longer my private reserve. It was a celebrated public gallery, and it generated more goodwill than a penthouse ever could. I took the new capital from the refi and the Kestrel deal, and I didn't just buy another building. I started the Stone Pier Fund, the Women in Property Initiative. It was a mentorship program and a seed funding vehicle for young women, just like me, who had the plans, but not the co-signers. My first investment was in a 24-year-old architect with a plan to rehab old warehouses in the West Loop. Her contracts were ironclad. Tessa, my cousin, I gave a choice. "You can't be my assistant anymore," I told her. "You are not an assistant. You are a risk analyst." I made her the head of internal communications and governance. It was her job to read every document, to log every meeting, to be the person who held the facts. She had chosen the truth over blood. She had earned it. The empire was secure. Tonight, I am standing on the penthouse terrace. The first Northlight Gala is glittering below. It is not a legacy dinner. It is a fundraiser. It's real. I look down at the lobby. The marble floor is clean. Where the Walker family estate planning banner once hung in arrogance, there is now the quiet, permanent display of sample contracts. My empire is not built on emotion. It's not built on claims, or hope, or shared history, or the poisonous, unwritten rules of family. It is built on the truth, the verifiable, documented, notarized, and unassailable truth. It is built on boundaries. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. So please drop a comment below and let me know your thoughts. And if you enjoyed this, please subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit that hype button so more people can hear this story.